We've kind of gotten used to BlackRock beating the numbers, beating expectations.
BlackRock is by far the largest, with roughly a 35% market share of domestic market.
Who is the most powerful man in the world? Some may say it is the President of the United States. Others may side with corporate America and deem the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to be more powerful. But there is someone else. It is likely you have never heard of BlackRock. In less than 30 years, this company has grown from nothing to becoming the world's largest asset manager. The assets in the roster exceed the value of $9 trillion, and their net worth is equal to half of America's GDP. Clearly, they do not need a name in the mainstream media to be successful, or, in fact, own and control the entire world. But who are they? What do they do? And how does this one company in America influence every industry and sector in the world? Let's begin with who they are. BlackRock was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink, along with Robert Capito, Susan Wagner, Barbara Novick, Ben Golub, Hugh Frater, Ralph Schlosstein, and Keith Anderson. Its aim was to provide corporations with asset management services to help them manage their risks and investments. The idea came when Fink, during his time in First Boston, lost $100 million as its head. That experience became the motivation for him to develop what he and the others considered to be excellent risk management and fiduciary practices. BlackRock first got its funding from Pete Peterson of the Blackstone Group, who believed in Fink's vision of a firm devoted to risk management. Fink's company then essentially became an arm of Blackstone, and it was called Blackstone Financial Management. In exchange for a 50% stake in the bond business, Blackstone gave Fink and his team a $5 million credit line. Within months, the business turned profitable, and by 1989, the group's assets had quadrupled to $2.7 billion. Blackstone's stake in Fink's company then fell to just 40%, as opposed to the 60% held by Fink and his group. The firm adopted the name BlackRock in 1992, and by the end of that year, BlackRock was managing $17 billion in assets. By the end of 1994, they were handling $53 billion. Sometime later that same year, Fink became the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, Inc. The company went public in 1999 at just $14 a share on the New York Stock Exchange. And by the end of that year, they were handling $165 billion in assets. BlackRock grew both organically and by acquisitions, and in 2004, they made their first significant acquisition, buying State Street Research and Management's holding company, SSRM Holding Inc., from MetLife for $325 million in cash and $50 million in stock. And this was only the beginning. We are aware, to some extent, that a handful of mega corporations and private investment companies dominate every aspect of our lives. What we watch, eat, drink, wear, buy, and go is all dictated. It is all less of a personal choice and more what is fed to us by corporations. All of these investment firms are so enormous that they control the money flow worldwide. While there appear to be hundreds of competing brands on the market, the truth is, larger parent companies actually own multiple smaller brands, like Russian nesting dolls. PepsiCo, for example, owns a long list of food, beverage, and snack brands, as does Coca-Cola, Nestle, General Mills, Unilever, Mars, Kraft Heinz, and Associated British Foods. Together, these parent companies monopolize the packaged food industry, as virtually every food brand available belongs to one of them. These companies are publicly traded and are run by boards, where the largest shareholders have power over the decision-making. And here is where it gets interesting, because when you look up who the largest shareholders are, you find yet another monopoly. While the topmost shareholders can change from time to time based on shares bought and sold, two companies are consistently listed among the top institutional holders of these parent companies: the Vanguard Group Inc. and BlackRock Inc. The same ownership trend exists in industries besides food and beverage. If you're planning a family vacation and using your laptop, phone, or tablet to research ticket prices and hotel stay, your go-to would probably be a site like Skyscanner, Booking.com, Airbnb, or Expedia, which provides you with all the information you need in one convenient place. Well, both of these companies are owned by BlackRock. You book your vacation and are set to fly, most likely with American Airlines, Air France, KLM, United Airlines, Delta, or Transavia. all of which BlackRock has a stake in. Even if you are not flying with any of these airlines, BlackRock still owns a percentage of Boeing and Airbus, two of the largest aircraft manufacturers in the world. If you arrive at your hotel and choose to write a review of your stay on TripAdvisor, you would be using a service also partly owned by BlackRock. And their power goes much further. The kerosene that fuels the plane comes from one of their many oil companies and refineries, and the steel that makes the plane also comes from their mines. The agricultural sector is not exempt from this either. BlackRock owns Bayer, the world's largest seed producer, along with some of the largest textile manufacturing plants and clothing companies. In addition to that, BlackRock has a stake in solar panel producing companies, major drug companies, and the scientific institutes and labs that fund drug studies. Places where you shop, from malls and department stores to Amazon and AliExpress, are owned by BlackRock. If you choose not to shop with them and support smaller local businesses, you are still supporting BlackRock when you use your credit card or any digital mode of payment to pay for your goods and services. Insurance companies, banks, construction companies, telephone companies, restaurants, personal care brands, and makeup brands are all in their sizable portfolio. In virtually every major company, you find BlackRock among the top 10 institutional investors. With its massive reach, BlackRock is essentially the fourth branch of government, influencing policies and decisions and even lending money to the central bank and Federal Reserve.
In past times of crisis, the Federal Reserve System has asked BlackRock for help managing funds.
But it's not abnormal for the Fed to be buying services from companies.
The 2008 financial crisis had the New York Federal Reserve leader Timothy Geithner ask BlackRock for help to manage the distressed assets Bear Stearns and AIG. In an echo of 2008, the Fed once again relied on BlackRock to stabilize the bond market amid the economic turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The details of the arrangement were not revealed, including how much BlackRock would be paid for their services. But it was undoubtedly a lucrative undertaking for the company, not to mention that they would also be in a position to profit from the advice they gave.
In the following months, the central bank purchased trillions of dollars in various assets and debts, including corporate bonds. BlackRock was tapped to manage this portion of the purchases.
BlackRock, of course, has used the central bank and the Fed's dependence on them to grow even further. This power has allowed Larry Fink to become a billionaire oligarch, holding incredible power, not just in America, but all over the world. If the company and Larry Fink hold such power, why is it that you have not heard of them more? There is power in anonymity. If BlackRock is barely featured in print publications and news channels, it is because they want it to be so. If they wanted, they could feature every day. BlackRock currently owns 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, and 13% of Comcast, which in turn owns NBC, MSNBC, and Sky. If any of those companies wanted to make a decision, they would have to also consult with BlackRock before doing so. The same is true for Google, a tech giant currently worth $853 billion. Amazon, Facebook, and Twitter are also not exempt, and neither is Disney. Thanks to their incredibly diverse investment portfolio in media alone, BlackRock essentially owns 90% of the world's media. If you don't know about them, it's because they don't want you to. Why? Owning a portion of the world doesn't come without its share of scandal or conflict. In August 2020, BlackRock became the first foreign company to be allowed into China's mutual fund industry, which means they can now invest and own parts of Chinese companies, including ones that are blacklisted by the United States. One of the first investments made by BlackRock was in Hikvision, a security and communications firm that essentially makes facial recognition software for use by the Chinese government. But this money isn't just BlackRock's or Larry Fink's. It comes from pension funds and bank accounts of ordinary civilians who have unknowingly given money to BlackRock in the past. If we take into account BlackRock's ownership over Western media, banks, e-commerce stores, social media, food and beverages, and many, many more industries, it becomes evident that the company has a wealth of data on us, and they may do with it what they please. TikTok's data harvesting pales in comparison to what BlackRock is capable of, given how they have everything from our bank account numbers to our personal tastes and preferences. As BlackRock's investment in China grows, so will China's influence on the world, and our personal data, which was hanging on a thread to begin with, will quickly end up in the wrong hands. With the trajectory BlackRock has been on, it seems their influence will only grow as they acquire more and more of the world to control. If such is the case, we are headed into a dystopian world where corporations have more power than governments, and things like voting and freedom of speech have less power than investment boards. What is the escape from this reality?
If you see something, say something.